Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing okay. This week we're working on a Palm Springs Hydrojet pump. Now, been having a few problems with it. We're getting bits into the water when the Hydrojet pumps are on. That's the Hydrojet massage system. I'm also getting quite a few E02 errors, which is where the pump isn't getting enough water flow through it and it's stripping the unit out. So I'm going to show you a full strip down of this unit. We're going to take the unit completely apart, work out all of the components, and I'm going to try to show you all the different parts that you can take apart, get into, clean, repair, replace all of the different gaskets, all of the different seals and things like that. And this will be similar to a lot of the different models that you see from Bestway and Lay Z Spa. So let's get on with it. So one of the things that you can do without having to strip it down and things like that is, what you do is you put the sealing caps on the inside of your hot tub, seal it off and take the pump off, as you see I've done here, and then I'm using the easy scale to give it a good clean. You basically use household descaling in it, which I mean, even if you're not using the descaler, it's good to give it a bit of a clean out now and again. So that's the first thing that you can do without starting to get serious and stripping the pump down and things like that. Now actually just running this for a few hours, a couple of times, you can probably hear in the background, it's actually running at the moment. It's running really quietly. A noisy pump tends to point to that there's an issue with it. Now we're still going to strip this one down because I do want to get inside it and make sure everything's okay in there, but that is a great first way of doing it. Now there's other videos on how to use the easy scale and things like that. I'll put all the links down the bottom in the description as well, so if you want to give that a go, it's certainly worth a try first before you start delving into it. But so far that's been running a while. It's actually been running at temperature. I've been running it away at temperature there, but now I'm going to switch it off, and what I'm going to do is unplug it completely from the mains before we start taking the cover off and start delving into it. That's important. I'll show you why once we get into the control box and the elements and show you which parts run at mains voltage, because parts of the internals of these run at mains. So do be cautious, always leave it unplugged whilst you're working on it unless you know what you're doing. So let's take the cover off and let's get inside it. What I thought I'd very quickly do is show you what came out after doing the easy scale. So in the bottom of here, obviously I've poured the water out, and in the bottom of the jug, not sure how well the camera is going to pick this up, but you can see all the scale in the bottom of there. I'll try and siphon it out and I'll show you the lumps of scale that have come out. And don't forget that I do maintain chlorine levels correctly. I do maintain my hot tubs really quite carefully every single day. I also use a descaling solution actually in the water in the tub, and despite all of that, that's the amount that this has got out. Now I'm going to try and get out the little filter seal. Oh, okay, there's not much caught in there. Oh, there's a bit more actually in the bottom of the easy scale itself as well. So it just shows that it really is worthwhile to do this job. I'll tip the water out and I'll show you what was left. So there we go. That's the scale that came out of the heater and pumping element after running the easy scale through it. Now I can only imagine that there's even more when we delve into it, so let's get the pump apart. The first thing is to separate the body assembly. Now on these ones it's a set of screws all around the outside. Now I've already taken those out on mine, which means I can lift the casing up, but be very careful when you do this. There is a wire that joins the control display down to the main processor, and you can just see it there, and that's just on a push clip. This is the 4-wire version. Of course there is the 6-wire as well. You just push and separate that. That now allows me to take the complete top cover off, like so. We can put that one away to one side, and we can now get into the internals of it, and I can show you a few of the key components here. The silver element here is exactly that. It's the heating element, and that is a mains 2-unit heater. You can see there's 4 wires coming out of it. Consists of 2 slabs that do the heating. This here is, I'll take you in a little bit closer. There you can see the flow sensor. Now this is the thing that tells the controller that water is or isn't flowing correctly, and will generate your E02 error if that's not working properly. We're going to take that apart and I'll show you how that works shortly. Then just beside it here with the red connector, this is the temperature sensor. This is what gives you the water temperature value that you see on the screen. So that's your 40 degrees, whatever. Helps regulate the temperature control and your overall temperature. That's on the red connector there. Now you can see very clearly that mine has been leaking. There is a gasket in there, and I know that that gasket is faulty on mine. You can see it's been leaking, and that's never a good thing, because you can see it can cause corrosion. It hits the electronics, so we're going to be replacing that one as well. Now there are a couple of other sensors that I want to draw your attention to. One is on this blue connector here, and you can see it's a little black piece of wire that's pushed down beside the temperature, beside the heater element. Now this is a cutout. If this goes over temperature, it will blow and it will cut out, and this is a safety feature. Now if you find that everything looks like it's working but your heater isn't heating up, that is one of the culprits. The second culprit, let's just take you over here, is this little black dimple here. Now this is a resettable switch, and on the outside of your hot tub you'll have that as a little black button. In fact, I'll show you on the casing. There you can see it. So that rubber there, that rubber button, pushes that there, and that is a resettable thermal switch. So if this gets too hot, that will pop out and it will tell the controller to stop running the heaters. So again, you'll get water flow, everything will look like it's working, but the heater won't heat up. So sometimes you need to press that quite hard if it's had a thermal cutout event. That's that component. Now the pump lives underneath, as does the power supply and the other components. However, on this one, if I just spin it round, this block here, and there's a similar block on all of the different models of pumps, but on this one, this is where the controller, which is the main brains of the unit, lives. If we just take off this water cover, it's just to avoid splashes and things hitting the controller. We take this off, and there you can see the main computer control board with all of the wiring. Now all of these wires, again, if this was connected and powered on, which I have disconnected from the mains, these would be live. These use mains electricity and are very dangerous to go near if they are powered on. So just a word of warning, all of these connectors you see are at mains voltage. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make sure that they're all labelled up. You can see out of the factory they're pretty good at labelling them, and you can see, so for example there, these two wires are labelled E, and if I go in onto the plastic casing, hopefully, if I move the wires out the way, you can see the plastic casing also says E, so you can join them all together and understand where they go back to. Now the key thing before you do any of that though is note which ones don't have anything connected. So in my case, D is not connected, all the others are. So it's actually quite a good tip to take a photo before you undo these wires, and then you've got them. So I'm going to do that right now and then disconnect them all. That's them all disconnected, just a very slight half turn and you can see they're U-shaped, so they just pull out, and that's all the connectors out. So we can now take our main processor board up. Now you will see there's another bunch of connectors along the bottom, and these are potted in, they're glued in, so you can't remove them, but they connect to the various temperature sensors and they all have small connectors on them. And if we follow the wiring back, you can see those connectors. So that's things like the temperature sensor, the cutout, the flow sensor. Now you might find there's a few cable ties and things like that which we need to cut, and then we can take the board away. And there's all the connectors disconnected. By the way, you don't need to undo and disconnect everything if you're not going to completely strip it down. If you only want to check the pump, the impeller, things like that, we're going to tip it upside down and I'll show you that part in a moment. You don't necessarily have to take all of these out, but as I'm doing an entire strip down job, I'm doing that. So there's the control board. Let's put that out of the way safely. And now what I'm going to do is turn the unit upside down and show you how to get at the pump, the impeller, the seals to that, and also the power supply to it, because those are the most common parts that have an issue and fail. And if we just tip it up, now there's always going to be water pours out at this point, so just be aware where you're doing it. You are going to lose water, and you'll see the bottom half then starts to separate, and the only downside to it is that you've got this mains cable that is well sealed in on the side. So I'm just going to separate this out and get you in for a closer look. Here's the underneath, and what can we see? I'll just move the earthing point out of the way. What we've got is we've got our main water pump. This is the filter pump that runs pretty much continuously whilst you've got the unit in use. And just down here, this is the transformer, the power supply for it. These pumps run at 12 volts as opposed to mains, so your control board feeds mains into the transformer then converts it down to 12 volts for this. And you can see there's a unscrew connector on that, which now allows us to remove the pump. And you take the pump out, there's two screws, and again this is the same on the egg models, the square models, they're all pretty similar. And what you do is you can undo them partially and try to slide them out. Now I don't have much luck doing that because they're normally sealed in quite well, because obviously they push up into the heater system and there's rubber seals on them, and they are quite tight, as you can imagine. Now again, what you can get is leaks coming from this seam here, because there's a seal and a seam fitted there. That's quite common. Also around this piece here, which is just a push fit connector, again using seals into the heater, and that's quite a common place. So if you're getting water whilst your pump's running, this is normally a good place to start looking. So I'm going to take those two screws out, and that should now allow me, you can see, just gently manipulate it and pull. If I just twist it round, you can now see those are the seals that join it into the heater. So this is the bottom of the heater unit, and again I'm getting a lot of scale appearing, which is what damages these pumps. So we're going to take the pump off and take a look at it, undo this here on the O-ring, and we should be able to slide it out. I've shown you how to do a pump tear down and seal replacement, but very quickly, just to recap, all you do, unscrew each of these, being careful. There are nuts on the bottom that will drop out, so make sure you don't lose those. But basically, undo all of these and you can lift the two halves of the pump. You can see we've got our seal here. Interestingly, again, we have bits of lime scale stuck in that seal, which won't be helping. And then you can lift the impeller out. Now you can see in this case the stick has stayed in the bottom, so careful you don't lose the little cap end. And what you're checking for here is whether this plastic is damaged in any way. What happens is this plastic cracks and inside is the magnet, and it will then corrode and damage. Now you can see this is in really quite good condition. I'm not too worried about that. The main shaft is fine, so really just replacing the seals on this one I think is the order of the day, and seal it back together, but that doesn't look too bad at all. Quite pleased with that. The next part to look at is back on the top, which is the heater. And the heater element is this silver block here, held in by these two U-shaped plastic connectors. They are quite brittle, so do be careful with them. But again, two screws either side and we should be able to take the heater element out. When you take this side out with the temperature cut out, just be careful. You don't want to damage it or nick it, especially when you put this back on again. Make sure it's not going to get damaged or too badly crushed. The idea is it is pushed up against the heater, but if you don't have heat coming through, that could be your issue, and you can test it fairly easily with a multimeter. So let's show you that. What you want to do is put the multimeter into the continuity test, which is the beep mode. So if I take the probes and touch them together, you hear a beep, and that's what we want to do with this here. All we want to do is carefully put one probe on one piece of metal on the connector here, hopefully you can see, the other on the other, and you can hear a solid beep. That means that it's making a connection, and that means that that is good. If you didn't get anything out of that, chances are that's blown at some point and needs replacing, otherwise you won't get heat. To remove the entire heater assembly, we also need to disconnect this pipe here, which again we just unscrew move that along the pipe out of the way, and now that's done, we should be able to lift and rattle. So the reason why you've got to lift is because it sits in this recess here, which is where it goes down to the pump that we removed underneath, and if you lift it up you can get it past that ridge. It takes a bit of rattling around to do it, and at the same time pulling the connector pipe out. You can hopefully see that's just coming out the top there, and then we can lift it out of the housing. You can see it's a bit of a fiddly fit, and there it goes, and we can take the heater completely out, along with our temperature sensor, our thermal cutout. Now I did also have to disconnect a couple of earthing wires off it. Remember to hold on to those screws, that's very important. The heater is safely earthed when you put it back together. And that means we've now got our heater element. We are going to continue and strip this down, so I'm going to show you the temperature sensor, because on mine you can see it leaking quite badly around the gasket on the temperature sensor. Now whether that there is it leaking around the heater element as well, I'm not sure, so I'm going to replace that one as well. If you do get lots of water stain marks around these pieces, then it is the gasket, and again, if you're in a hard water area, chances are the lime scale has caused that. That's really common. So I'm going to take this off and we'll have a look inside. Now it is good practice whenever you take any of these apart to replace the rubber seals or gaskets, because they do work better if you've replaced them when you put them back together. So it's a good idea to buy them in advance. I'll put all of the links down the bottom in the description so that you can see all of the parts that I've used for this. So if we lift that out, try not to lose the screws, there you can see the rubber gasket, and the silver is the temperature sensor. Now you can see the screws are a little rusted, so we do have a leak going on there, so I think that rubber gasket has definitely gone. Now actually looking in the chamber, it doesn't look too bad. We don't see lots of debris and things like that in there. But I'm also going to take this off the end of the heater block, and again you do that with the screws down each side, so I'll take that off. Now actually the gasket hasn't ripped apart. When I've done this in the past, quite often the gasket completely rips to pieces when you lift it off. But you can see the lime scale that is built up. If I just take the gasket off, what happens is the lime scale builds up on it and eats away at the rubber. Now you can see there is quite a lot in there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a very powerful descaler and let it sit in there. So I need to take the other end off with the heater elements, and we can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. Again, I'll put a link down the bottom to Amazon to get this from, because this does a really good job on scale. It's really quite powerful. But to do it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the base back on, and I'm going to try to fill it as much as I can with this and leave it to sit probably overnight, to be honest. So I'm going to put the base cap back on again, and try to actually, sorry, wrong way around. I'm going to put the top cap back on again so that it's sealed, and that means that when I fill it with the scale away, then it's going to sit in there. You can see, just slide it back on. I'm using the old gasket for now because chances are it's going to get damaged in this process, and I do have some new gaskets arriving. So just push that back on. I'm going to screw it back together, and then actually, before we do that, why don't we give it a couple of sprays on this bit just to get the process started, like so. Now let's get this back on. Now I'm not sure, it doesn't say that it's bad for rubber seals, this chemical, but like I say, I am going to be replacing the seals anyway, and I would recommend you do that. Every time you remove something that has a seal like this, it does weaken it and change the way that the compression works. It all works through the compression of the seal against the housing, so you're best off to replace it. And And now we're going to turn our attention to the airjet system, which is mainly carried in here and through these components here. So first thing, we're going to take this cover off. Again, simple screws, take that out. What you'll find is you might need to prise this a little bit because it does get quite stuck. It's starting to come now. And inside you can see this is the 240 volt large air motor, or at least the motor that drives the air system. Now if you do need to replace this, it's bolted in at the bottom, 4 bolts, and also screwed in onto the side here. Now I'm not going to take this completely out because I don't need to replace the motor, but if you are having problems, that's where you want to look. It's a really quite big beefy motor, that one. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the airjet actual system itself, which is at the front here. Now I'm going to see how the best way of getting into this is, so let's have a look at that. The next part I'm going to take off is this sensor housing here. You can see the plug just simply unplugs off the front, 4-pin connector. You then spin this collar off like so, and then we can gently prise this out. Now it's just held in with the rubber seal, so be careful. I wouldn't recommend trying to spin it or anything, but if you just gently rock it, again another rubber seal, and we can get inside. We can see the vane components inside, and again if we've got lots of build-up inside here of lime scale, we want to clean this out. This isn't too bad actually, there is a few bits you can see on there, so I'm going to give this a little bit of a clean just to be sure. This is a good piece to make sure it is clean and emptied out of lime scale, so a little bit of water through there, because this is all part of the filter and heating components. Now I said before about the flow switch, which is the main thing that does the E02 error, and it's this component in here. This is the flow sensor. Actually, let's take the top sensor itself off first, this little collar, and this is the flow sensor. It's just a very simple reed switch, so that detects a magnet. Let's just put that to one side. Again, this is a really common point where you get water leaks coming from, but at the same time, if this is damaged in any way, then you will constantly get E02 errors. There's our rubber gasket. Actually, it's not in a great condition. It's actually starting to come apart by the looks of it, so that one's definitely worth replacing. Now when you take this off, pay attention to which way this fits. It should be the water flow pushes this little flap up, and inside there is a magnet, and when that magnet is up near the top, that little black sensor that was pushed in the top detects it and is what tells the controller that water is flowing through happily. So again, if any of this is damaged, or you can see the magnet has cracked or anything like that, that will need replacing. In this one, it just looks like it needs cleaned up and a new gasket. And now onto the airjet components. First thing I'm going to do is take this nozzle off here. Now this is a series of screws, and again, you don't actually have to remove them all to get them out. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it isn't. You can see they're a little bit fiddly, so a long screwdriver will help you out here. Hopefully we can reach all of them and get this whole component off, and we can just check the seals inside this as well. So the problem I've got is that one screw there. Unfortunately, my small screwdriver can't fit in, so I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to take that one out easily. And I think, unfortunately, what that means is you have to take this whole assembly apart, separating it from the motor. So I'm going to try that. Well, I've got to say, I've made a mistake there. The only way to get at that is actually to take the pump off. So I'm going to get a socket down onto there, take the 4 off there, disconnect this pipe, and then we should, with a bit of struggling, be able to take this whole assembly out. At least we can then easily get at it and get the internal seals and clean all of that out. I was trying to sneak my way around it, see if there was an easier way of doing it, but there isn't. So now we need to get these four bolts. There we go. So what size is that? 13mm. Get those undone. We can get the motor assembly moving and disconnected. And actually, to make it easier, I think it's going to be simpler to take all of this off and completely detach it from the base, so that I'm not putting too much stress on any of this plastic. And that's one of the key things that I've found. The plastic can be very brittle on the inside of these Lay Z Spa Bestway units. You're best off not stressing it too much. And in this case, I think this is the right thing to do. Might take a little bit longer, but I think it's the right thing to do. Now typically I did that on camera. What I did, used my foot to hold the base and lifted the pump, and you can see it's starting to come free. Having that free is helping us. Now if I can disconnect it either on this connector or this connector, then it should separate. I've undone all of them just so that it can come apart in however it comes off easiest, and we can figure it out from there. So I'm going to do that. I need both hands because it's really heavy, this pump, and try to manipulate it. And now to take the main jet seal off, which is all of these screws, so that's going to take me a while. There we have another seal that we can check. You can see a little bit of debris in there as well that we can clean out. And what we can see now is in the middle we can see part of the impeller setup. So this spins and forces the water out, water and air at high speed. Now you can see this might happen. You might get a little bit of build up in here. So again, we want to clean all of this out, make sure there's nothing caught in here before we seal it back up. So I'm going to give that a good clean. Now that we're cleaned out and the insides are all okay, it's now just a reassembly. So just line everything back up again and do the opposite of taking it all apart. Just on reassembling it, knowing which way round everything goes so it all lines up when you put it back together. The good thing is that a lot of the screws are unique, or at least the screw holes. So you can see this cluster of 3 here only fit one way round. Similar with this pipe here, knowing which orientation it should be. If you didn't make a note or mark it beforehand, what you've actually got is this little notch here that only fits in this one place, so you know that you've got that set the right way up. It's a good little tip. Most of the connectors on the Lay Z Spa units are like that, so it's quite a good thing. Well, you can see I've got most of it back together now, got all of the fittings on it. The one thing I haven't put back on yet is the heater, because I'm letting that soak a little bit longer to get rid of as much scale as I can before I assemble that back together. But otherwise, that's pretty much it all back together, cleaned out, new seals, things like that. A few of the seals did completely rip in half. You can see that there was one of the, I can't remember which one it was, that was one of the water seals. So I'm glad that I've done this and replaced them. But there we go, that's a strip down and put back together of one of the Lay Z Spa or the Bestway hot tub pumps. Hope this was useful to you, and please remember to subscribe and also put a like or a comment down the bottom. All the parts I've used will be in the description. So I hope that's been of use, and see you next time.